Shock? Zelensky's plane narrowly avoided a drone strike at the last minute. What happened in the skies over Ireland? An explosion in a military exercise? While the US and Ukraine are negotiating peace, Putin is rolling out threats from the past. Sensation. Vance promises the end of the war. Trump talks peace, while the Kremlin threatens the West again. The Kremlin's secret. Why did Witkoff and Kushner disappear after the Moscow feast? The commander-in-chief returns. What is hidden behind Zaluzhny's arrival in Ukraine? I'll tell you all the details in a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. Shock, an attempt on Zelensky's life. The president of Ukraine's plane was pursued by mysterious drones. However, the appearance of unidentified UAVs moving toward the landing trajectory of Volodymyr Zelensky's plane in Dublin did not have any impact on the course of the Ukrainian president's visit to Ireland. This was stated by Dmytro Litvin, the Ukrainian president's communications advisor.
The host country is responsible for security. According to their information, there really were such drones, but this did not affect the visit or force any changes to be made to it.
The Irish publication The Journal reported, citing its own sources, that 4 unidentified military-type drones violated the no-fly zone and flew in the direction of the flight path of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's plane, over the sea near Dublin Airport.
The plane landed slightly ahead of schedule, a few minutes before the incident, which occurred around 11:00 p.m. The drones reached the spot where Zelensky's plane was supposed to fly, precisely at the moment it was expected to pass through.
According to the publication, after that, the drones circled above an Irish Navy ship that had been secretly deployed to the Irish Sea. Regarding Zelensky's visit,
sources report that the drones took off from the northeast of Dublin, likely near Howth, and flew for up to 2 hours. An investigation is underway to determine whether the drones launched from land or from an undetected ship.
Let me remind you, this was Volodymyr Zelensky's first official visit to Ireland with his wife. It was there that the Ukrainian delegation reported to the president on the progress of negotiations with the United States. Meanwhile, in Miami, the Ukrainian and American delegations concluded another meeting. Representing Ukraine were Rustem Umerov, Andriy Ignatov, and the US ambassador Olga Stefanishina. The bustling diplomatic kitchen never stops working for a second. This is already the 3rd meeting of this format. Before this, there was Geneva on November 23rd and Miami on November 30th. According to Umerov, the delegation is acting strictly according to Zelensky's directives. The details are not being disclosed yet. One thing is known. They discussed the next steps in the US-Ukrainian negotiation process. Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance caused a sensation in the information space. In an interview with NBC News, he admitted that the main disappointment is that the White House still hasn't managed to end the war in Ukraine. Vance is confident that the progress is enormous and the final milestone is already near.
I truly believe that we have made great progress, but we have not yet reached the finish line. There is hope, and hopefully in the next few weeks there will be good news on this front. And
this is where Trump comes in. He stated that resolving the war in Ukraine is just a matter of time.
This needs to be stopped. We are working very hard on this. And
a sudden twist from Putin. War is peace. Supposedly, he started the bloody special military operation to end the war. And that it was the West, using Ukrainian hands, that attacked Russia. Propaganda at its maximum.
The special military operation was not the start of the war, but an attempt to end it.
But that's not all. Putin is once again making threats and reverting to the goals of 2022. ISW analysts are sounding the alarm. The dictator still wants to destroy NATO and seize all of Ukraine.
The Institute for the Study of War continues to assess that Putin in particular launched his full-scale invasion in order to destroy NATO and seize control over all of Ukraine. His initial military demands include not only demands toward Ukraine, but also toward NATO and the West.
Putin also tried to conceal his rejection of the latest US peace plan, as if it contained provisions unacceptable to the Russian Federation.
The Institute for the Study of War continues to believe that the Kremlin is deliberately refraining from publicly discussing the December 2nd meeting in order to conceal Russia's rejection of the US and Ukrainian peace proposal, which did not take into account all of Russia's absolutist military demands.
Let us recall that Trump's negotiators, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, suddenly cancelled their meeting with Zelensky in Brussels and, according to media reports, after a dinner in Moscow and hours of waiting for Putin, immediately headed to Washington. To see what happened in the Kremlin, watch the report.
The negotiations regarding the peace plan between Putin, the US Special Representative Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner lasted almost 5 hours. This was the first time that an exchange of views between the American and Russian sides on the US peace plan took place in this format in Moscow. And according to the Kremlin, there are positive developments.
No, it will not be the right one. It will not be the right one. The point is, in fact, that this kind of direct exchange of views took place. It happened for the first time yesterday. Again, as was said yesterday, some things were accepted, some were deemed unacceptable. This is a normal working process, a search for compromise.
Putin is not rejecting the so-called Trump peace plan, but he is not agreeing to it either. Putin's special envoy Dmitriev described the talks with Witkoff and Kushner as productive. Witkoff has already flown to Moscow for the 6th time. This year, and apart from wasted time, there has been no global result. Russia is not ready to make any concessions and is standing its ground.
That is, Russia said, yes, we are ready to accept a lot of points, except for those that are fundamental for Ukraine. We actually know it's the same points. What is fundamental for Russia and for Ukraine? Only in completely opposite directions. It is most likely impossible to work according to this plan, because for Ukraine, these are also red lines. Everything else might suit both sides, but they still can't reach an agreement.
At the same time as the meeting between Witkoff and Putin, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave an interview on Fox News. He said that right now, Ukraine and Russia are fighting over a territory the size of 20% of the Donetsk region, which is under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. And if these military actions are stopped and security is ensured, then in the near future, Ukraine can look forward to promising prospects.
Theoretically, if everything is done right, in 10 years, Ukraine's GDP could surpass Russia's GDP. That's what's needed. Stop the war. Make sure they are never invaded or attacked again. Protect Ukraine's long-standing sovereignty and independence so that it does not become a puppet state. They are truly independent and sovereign, and this allows their economy not just to recover, but to thrive, and to turn it into a story of prosperity.
It sounds beautiful in words, but at the moment, no one is giving Ukraine such guarantees. And the pressure on Russia is not increasing. That's why only a strong Ukrainian army and successes on the battlefield matter. At the moment, these are the only factors ensuring further success in the negotiation process with Russia. And for this, Ukraine needs as much military support as possible. By the end of the year, Ukraine will receive $5 billion worth of weapons under the Pearl program. Next year, support at the same level is expected, according to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He expects that in 2026, Ukraine's partners will allocate $1 billion per month for arms purchases.
Right now we have $4 billion, so that means we really are on track for $1 billion a month. August, September, October, November. Next year we will again need a lot of money for the whole year, at least $1 billion. Maybe even a little more than $1 billion a month. Maybe?
Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis Budrys is convinced that the US efforts for a peace agreement will not succeed. Russia is simply trying to convince the international community that violating fundamental international principles is normal.
If we recognize Russia's territorial gains, it instantly kills international law. The consequence will be new attacks and even more threats, both for Russia's neighbors and everywhere else.
The offensive continues. They are biting off pieces of Ukrainian territory. Russia's economic problems are not yet that critical. And as long as the Kremlin truly has no reason to seek peace, well, in fact, peace will not come.
Now the negotiations will be put on pause. And at this moment, it is very important that Russia does not achieve military successes at the front, but on the contrary, in order to strengthen Ukraine's negotiating position.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Meanwhile, a high-profile return. Ukraine's former commander-in-chief, now UK ambassador, Valery Zaluzhnyi, is back in Ukraine. On social media, a photo with his wife and the caption, "There's no place like home." Earlier, he shared his forecast on how the war will end. All the details are in the following report.
Russia is trying to exhaust Ukraine and destroy it from within, while political illusions about reconciliation could end in internal conflict. This is what Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Valery Zaluzhnyi, writes in a column for the publication Liga.net. The former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, after a long period of silence and working in the foggy Albion, seems to have returned once again. Not only has he reappeared in the information space, but he has also physically come back to Ukraine. After the resignation of the head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak, and the unstable political situation, it appears that President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky has played his trump card. This is the return of the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine.
There is an opportunity, for example, to quickly bring Zaluzhnyi back from London. This would immediately strengthen Ukraine's overall position. And to a large extent, Zaluzhnyi is sitting in London as an ambassador, as I understand it, precisely for such a moment when it might be necessary to achieve some consolidation in the face of an external threat. And the external threat here lies precisely in the instability of the United States' position regarding this war, since their stance is wavering. In
his recently published column in Liga.net, Zaluzhnyi notes that a quick peace would definitely mean only a crushing defeat and the loss of independence. He suggests focusing on the idea of a ceasefire. As for final peace agreements with Russia, in his opinion, they are only possible if there are absolute security guarantees.
Such security guarantees could include Ukraine joining NATO, the deployment of nuclear weapons on Ukrainian territory, or the stationing of a large military contingent capable of countering Russia. However, this is not being discussed today. And given the technological and doctrinal unpreparedness of any NATO member country or any other country except for Russia, Ukraine and China, this issue fundamentally cannot be considered.
After Russia failed to physically conquer Ukraine, ex-Lovcom. I am sure that in the Kremlin, besides the military component, they have focused on undermining Ukrainian society from within. The so-called strategy of attrition. The
strategy of attrition has its own decisive blow. And if for the enemy this means bringing the country to collapse due to military actions, political and economic situations, then what is the decisive blow in this situation? If we recall history, the answer is obvious. It is civil war. Yes, this is exactly the decisive blow that Russia systematically seeks to achieve. The implementation of the strategy of attrition, according
to Zaluzhnyi, freezing the conflict along the front line is currently one of the most likely scenarios for ending the war. But the reconciliation will be short-lived.
The intermediate stage may involve freezing hostilities along the front line, which I consider to be perhaps the most likely scenario. Whether anyone likes it or not, these are the objective realities that are taking shape, both on the battlefield and in economic terms, as well as in social and political aspects.
The return of the pledged Ukraine and its article is definitely a signal to Ukrainian society and to the whole world that the struggle on both the diplomatic and military fronts continues and that no one will agree to Russia's terms. And
what do you think about the incident with the drones and the Ukrainian president's plane? We await your comments. There's more to come. Stay up to date with the main news and don't forget to like. Peaceful skies above your head.